at what the newspapers have been saying around the world today. And to help us do that, we have Florence Villemot with us here on the set. Hi, Flo.
Hi, Jean.
Obviously, lots of focus again today on those increasing tensions in Ukraine.
That's right. It's on the front page of a lot of papers. Let's start by looking at the international New York Times that talks about how there are few options for Kiev as what it calls this revolt spreads. Now, several eastern cities have seen state institutions passed into the hands of separatists, and The Independent likens all this to falling dominoes in the east, and it wonders how spontaneous are these pro-Russian protests? Well, depends on who you ask. And you can see this quote here from a 60-year-old in that area saying, "I've lived here my whole life and I've never seen these men." But this is another interesting article by Mary Dejevsky. She says that both sides in the Ukraine conflict claim that they have the truth here. There's a huge gap in perception, whether you are pro-European or pro-Russian, and what one side accepts as the truth, the other calls propaganda or malicious lies. And she says all this leads to two narratives and a very dangerous situation. To quote the article, "It's all too easy to envisage civil war being triggered by mistake."
All right, and a lot of other newspapers are focusing on how the international community is reacting to this crisis.
That's right. I pulled out a cartoon from the International New York Times. It's quite critical of the United States. You can see John Kerry there, the U.S. Secretary of State, with his arms and legs caught in hunting traps, and they represent the Syria crisis, the peace talks, nuclear talks, and the Ukraine crisis. Meanwhile, he's saying, yes, we can, but a lot of papers are wondering if that's really the case.
All right, another big news story is that explosion in Nigeria yesterday that left some 70 dead.
That's right. As you can imagine, it's getting a lot of attention in the regional press. I pulled out an article from L'Observateur Palga that's in Burkina Faso. It has a very graphic article about the aftermath of that attack at the bus station there in the outskirts of Abuja. Now, this article says that it likens Nigeria actually to a locomotive that just doesn't stop derailing. Now, other papers are wondering what motivated this attack. There's an article in Slate, for instance, that talks about the fact that it's quite obvious to suspect the Islamist group Boko Haram, and indeed Nigerian authorities have, and it's easy to think that would be the case because since 2009 the group has carried out attacks across the country. But this article points out that both the United Nations and the U.S. Council on Foreign Relations actually say that the government too is partially responsible for spreading violence in the country.
Here in France, many papers are focusing on the European elections that are again just around the corner next month in May.
That's right. It's no secret that the Socialist Party is pretty worried that these elections could be another flop, just like the municipal elections were in March. This is an article in Le Figaro. And the photo there is of the new Socialist Party leader, Jean-Christophe Cambadélis. Now, he's going to be inaugurated today, but this article, right-leaning paper, is quite critical of him, saying he's not really going to change the party line since his predecessor, Harlem Désir. Now, Cambadélis is drawing criticism from the right, but also from the left. There's another article I pulled out from Aujourd'hui en France that's pointing out that a lot of people within the Socialist Party are angry with the president, François Hollande, for handpicking him and placing him at the top of the party. And this is just the latest point of disagreement between heavyweights in the Socialist Party and the French president. According to this article, a lot of socialists are openly criticizing the president, and the gloves are really coming off.
Well, things aren't much better over on the other side of the political fence with the opposition conservative UMP party.
That's right. This is another article in Le Figaro. It's quite surprising because the UMP did very well in the municipal elections. We talked about la vague bleue, the blue wave. So what's wrong? Well, according to this article, the UMP is really doing some soul searching, trying to find what the party line should be on European politics. And this article says the party is very divided between Eurosceptics and Europhiles. Nobody can agree, says Le Figaro, and all this could play into the hands of the far-right National Front Party.
All right, Flo, let's wrap up in the United States, where many papers there are marking this one-year anniversary of the bombings of the Boston Marathon.
That's right, a year ago today, and I pulled out a very touching article in the International New York Times about two brothers, J.P. and Paul Norden. Now, they attended the marathon last year to cheer for a friend who was approaching the finish line, and so they were wounded in the blasts and actually each lost a leg. So it's a very touching article about their struggles since then, how they've slowly been trying to rebuild their lives. They've had 50 surgeries between them, and how they've had to learn how to walk with their new prosthetic legs. Now, they refuse to dwell on a single incident of violence and don't want to be defined by it, but they have written a book. It's called Twice as Strong, and they're taking advantage of the swirl of media that they're in to thank all the tens of thousands of people that donated money to help them with their medical expenses. Now, tributes will be held in Boston starting today and until April 21st. That's when this year's marathon will be held.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Florence Bilmano, for that look at the newspapers today. Well, tennis news is up next. That and much more in sports on France 24, starting right now.
Benoit Paire has lost in the opening round of the Monte Carlo Masters to Spanish clay specialist Albert Montañez. The Frenchman rallying